G'day, friends and fans. Welcome to Writing Corner. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the book The Boyhood of Cade, book one of the Empire of Elves. And welcome to Creating Unique Fantasy Worlds. Now, I think everybody, when they write fantasy or fantasy sci-fi or urban fantasy, they all tend to be medieval. That is your typical medieval kingdom ruled by a lord, and things tend to follow the same fantasy tropes. But there are alternatives. There is steampunk, of course, which is one of the most popular variants. Of course, urban fantasy, you can have a democracy, you can have a dictatorship, you can have post-apocalyptic fantasy, a fantasy world that is post-apocalyptic. Magic awakened, destroyed the world at the same time. Most prefer low tech with magic, whereas I've gone high tech. But you can have a more structured society than, say, you can have anything, really. You can have the Stone Age. You can have a more structured society than your typical medieval fiefdom, where the Lord sits on and collects the taxes, and that's it. Now, many fantasy writers, but I'm not singling out American fantasy writers in particular, but it does tend that they tend to write a European fantasy world, though some have explored Japanese because of manga, but really that's about as far as it gets. Now, there are many subgenres of fantasy. In fact, fantasy and science fiction overlap. Many of the techniques are the same, many of the tropes are the same. Whereas with fantasy and science fiction, the difference often is with fantasy, you have a set of established folklore creatures, whereas science fiction replaces fantasy with aliens, or sync mono race, where there's just humans and cyborgs or androids. Now, of course, there's also with fantasy you have magic, whereas with science fiction you tend to have the mental powers. So yeah, but I overlap a lot of tropes. It's may frustrate some, but some people adore the fact that there is no one system, and that you don't have to have a traditional fantasy medieval world where science hasn't gotten past. Mix these couple of powders and you got gunpowder. Magic. Magic or boomstick. Boomstick easy, but magic way cooler. So yeah, boomsticks tend to be left outside. You can be specific in your fantasy world where it's actually turns out to be post-apocalyptic, or a game simulation. You don't have to have a medieval world. But when you do craft a fantasy setting to make it unique, get some history cards. Well, those little history books or kids. They got little the school projects, little fact cards, little facts about history, primers for kids to learn history with. And another way, of course, is to go to trope sites and look at the tropes and go, well, if these are the most worn tropes, I will use the least worn tropes. And so it goes. If Then, of course, most people chase the trends with right now, and of course, most fantasy tends to be pseudo Japanese anime style and ripped straight out of a pseudo apocalyptic world where there's remnants of civilization, remnants of technology, but it's more where you got robots, but you got medieval villages of ninjas and samurai and noble lords, and you know, people running around with mysterious powers, and dark creatures roam the forests. So those all tend to be uh, inspired by Naruto, Bleach, or your top Shogun anime. Was it Sacred Princess? That's a good one. It's got a good twist. You could go the route of even Sailor Moon. There are many ways you could draw inspiration and say, with a little bit of work, this is a fantasy world without having to go back to the medieval ages or the Stone Age. Actually, although one of the best books out there, virtually no dialogue, Clan of the Cave Bear, virtually no dialogue, would be an excellent early fantasy setting where you, in the beginnings of fantasy, there are so many failed explorations, however, so you have to be very careful because unfortunately these days too many people want nostalgia. Too many people want, oh, I want my Harry Potter knockoff. I want my Lord of the Rings knockoff. They don't want unique. They don't, and that is a problem where too many fantasy books are popular simply because they're yet another, I'm not going to say Arthurian tale because they're not. I'm trying to think of it. Medieval Disney fairy princess tale. Zelda. Save the princess. Whereas the Arthurian, where it's actually a very good fantasy setting, even though it is well worn, it is not as cliched as the Disney fairy princess fantasy world. The Arthurian legend branches out many. You can branch all day with that because it's how deep your world is, how much lore you have, and how much you're willing to add to it. And of course, you have to go back, of course, over world building, of course, and go back and look at the tropes that you want to abandon and want to keep. But one of the best sites I recommend for tropes is TV tropes. What's the difference between a trope and a cliche? Well, a trope is just that, okay? It is a characteristic. It is a defining element of that genre. No one trope on its own. Fantasy is not, medieval is not a required trope of fantasy. No one magic system. You have high magic, low magic. You have, most fantasy settings are very ill-defined, low magic systems. Whereas high magic with rules and stuff, yeah, those tend to be more in your gamelet style fantasies, where everything's just a simulation for some reason. I guess people are obsessed with virtual worlds and like the idea that they can become virtual characters, I guess, to escape the mundane. like Netrunners in Cyberpunk. Well, that would be a fantasy twist, a cyberpunk fantasy world. Oh, wait, there is that. It's called Shadowrun. There you go, folks. Sort of area that I am writing in. But overall, when it comes to designing a fantasy world, of course, I laid out in world building what the path to build a world. But when it comes to creating a unique fantasy world, you have to go. When a trope is so overused, orphan becomes the chosen one. Harry Potter. Almost everything in Harry Potter is a cliche, and that is sad that such a derivative work of early schoolboy novels and books and in my opinion much better series all got ripped off, distilled, boiled, given the AI treatment, ghostwritten into one hyped, high, way overhyped, way over. I mean, whoever had the marketing budget for that, I mean, the multi-million-dollar budget, that was just such a huge risk. If it didn't pay off, I would say, well, it did break Bloomsbury. The 100+ million they paid to J.K. Rowling never got repaid. Borders went broke. Warner Brothers is broke, shopping around for money. So there was a huge risk that really didn't pay off. And if it wasn't for the shill media shilling, I think I'm not just saying Harry Potter, I think most series today would be dead. I think most of the studios are just spending too much money. They're not paying, which ironically, they're not paying the writers enough, and they're overpaying the actors. Why? Because they're Jacobins. It's political. They believe in the actor, not the writer, as the true artist. That they think the actor is irreplaceable, whereas the writer is nothing more than the it's very hard to describe how low they think of the writer, while at the same time you're just a little bit above the audience, you know? They believe in a caste system, and the actor, of course, is subservient to the director, is subservient to the producer, is subservient to the studio, and of course the studio, they see the investor as a fool to pull part money from, of course. They're all grifters. They exploit the writers, so my wish, of course, is for AI to free the writer from the studio. Hear me out. You imagine you just wrote a book, you feed it to an AI and it makes the movie. Yeah, it puts a lot of people out of work, but you get all the profit, and you can make 99-cent movies, just like all these big artists for so long have been making 99-cent music. They don't trickle down the economy. They drain the economy of millions of dollars every year, and they live in a selfish bubble of luxury goods, and there's no economy. The music industry does not boost the economy. It is sad that writers of music, of books, of creators of art are exploited so poorly because, and we're afraid of the Writers Guild. We're afraid of the unions. We don't want to. What do they do for us? Yeah, nada, zip, nil. Where a select few get overpaid, and then the rest get underpaid to make up for that. And then now, of course, I think with Bloomsbury, they're no longer the same publishing house they used to be. So And we're seeing a discrepancy, right? And pretty much, independent artists are going to win out in the end. I really see the end of I really see, hopefully, even with the bookshops, these bookshops, they're just, we publish a book and you get 20 cents per book. That's ridiculous. Whereas the bookshop gets dollars, the publishers make dollars, everybody, the taxman makes dollars, the printers make dollars. Everybody makes dollars but the person who created the book, because we have less economic power than the collective. And that is the problem with democracy, that you believe in the collectives and collectivism, that the majority should always prosper. Well, they prosper the artist is the oppressed minority. Let you chew on that one. That's a dystopic world we live in right now. Is to be a writer, is to live in a dystopic world. To be oppressed. To choose a career where the vast majority will not prosper. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and all the other stuff. This channel is supported by you, the viewing audience. So please check out the links in the description below. Become a patron today, or buy me a coffee or a meal. Thank you for listening. My book links are in the description below, of course, in my link tree. Thank you, and I'll see you all in the next video.